But I'm going to tell you this, we ain't done yet.
Howdy and welcome back to the Ineligibles podcast. I am Will Stone and he is Chase Caldwell.
I'm Chase Caldwell.
I was waiting for it.
That pause, I was like, every time you do that, I wonder, like, should I do the little, creep in and be, I'm Chase Caldwell, or do I do it too much? And so,
yeah, no, it's a good bit. We appreciate you joining us, however you choose to do so, and we have a lot of good episodes coming up. We've got our positional previews that we're getting into. We're starting conference breakdowns next week, so make sure you're subscribed on your application of choice. We don't want you to miss anything. But today we are talking running backs, and let's get right into it. I know we're excited to talk about this position group. It's possibly the deepest position on the team. We can talk about that. But I saw that Phil Steele's magazine came out over the past week, and he has the A&M running back room ranked as the top running back room in the country over the likes of Georgia and Alabama. So,
really?
yeah. So
that's awesome.
It's definitely gaining a lot of national recognition, and rightfully so. But without further ado, let's get right into the presumed starter. I believe he was All-American last year, All-SEC, Isaiah Spiller. He carried most of the load last year and really came into his own. I follow a ton of draft guys on Twitter, and they all love this kid. He's more than likely going to depart for the NFL after this year and be a fairly high draft pick. But he's got one more year left in an A&M uniform, and I'm pumped about him.
By far and away, I think this guy is just he's just a workhorse. You look at his first year with the team, he stepped in and just, I think he took almost every single rep.
He almost had to, like after Corbin got hurt.
We didn't really have a choice, and
yeah,
and I mean he took on a really, really, really tough schedule and just went out there, and we still ran it all the time, and he just took it in stride. I mean, that freshman year of his, I walked away from that year. If you would have asked me at any point in the year, but definitely at the end of the season, if you would have asked me who the toughest person on the team was, I would have told you Isaiah Spiller, because the amount of hits that he took, knowing that there was really no backup, and he just kept after it. He was very impressive to me.
I think he played through a broken toe at the end of 2019, like in the bowl game against Oak State. I think it came out afterwards that he had a broke toe and just wrapped it up and played through it. And I think he had a pretty good game that game. But after his freshman season, he came in, he wasn't a midterm guy, so he came in over the summer, went through fall practice. And I think he was not to talk bad about him, but he wasn't overweight by any means, but he was a little bit chubby. He still had a little bit of baby fat on him, but I think you could definitely tell last year that he had spent a lot of time in the weight room, really transformed his body, and he was pretty durable. I know he had a few nicks here and there, but I mean he was getting a ton of carries, and he was the hero of the Florida game. Like that one drive, we just gave him the ball play after play after play, and he ends up trucking a linebacker and getting in the end zone and kind of changing the whole momentum of that game. And he had an outstanding year. I wanted to make this comparison for a while, and now I have a venue to do so. But he really is just a really good all-around back. Like I don't know if he's a 10 at any one thing, but he's a 9 at all of them. And the comparison I've thought about being a diehard Cowboys fan is DeMarco Murray, that played for the Cowboys for a long time in the early 2010s. Just a really solid. He blocks well. He has great vision, great balance, makes good cuts, can catch the ball. He doesn't have the fumble issue that DeMarco had. So I think I think DeMarco may have had a bit more straight line speed coming out of OU, but I think it's a good comp, and it wouldn't shock me at all to see Isaiah go even, in the first round next year and have a great NFL career.
Yeah, and well, going back to what we were saying about him just coming out right away as a freshman, I doubt that was the plan. I doubt that we intended to put all of the weight on his shoulders.
Right.
But if you look back at that season, he was our guy. I mean, he led the whole team, I would say, just in terms of he put them on his back, and he
put the team on his back, though.
Yeah, literally. Like I wanted to try to avoid that phrase, but I just couldn't. You know what I mean?
It fits.
Yeah, I mean it's in my opinion the quintessential example of that, because he was a true freshman coming in. He was very young, like you said. Like maybe he wasn't full on, college football player. That, I mean, he hadn't had the time with the experts to help him train. Like, oh, here's how you lose 1 pound on this part of your body. Like he was just straight out high school player, but he grew up very fast, and I'm sure he was probably a very mature kid anyways. But when you're put in that position and you're going into the toughest division of the toughest conference in college football, and you're having more snaps than the more players on the team, for the exception of maybe the quarterback, and you're running the ball 60-70% of the time. There was no way you couldn't like him at the end of that season. And so I think that's really good, because not only is he now the leader in that group, I think he always has been. And so he has experience leading that group by example, and gives these guys a lot of just a really good example to look up to and to learn from. And you wouldn't have expected that from a true freshman player, but halfway through his first season, that's got to be where everybody saw him as,
Yeah, I think going into last season, I expected him to have a pretty good year. Last year, like he didn't even start the year as the starter. It was Anias who started, the first game. So we were like, is Spiller, is he lacking a little bit? Like, has Anias passed him? Are they gonna, split carries 50-50? And then, later on, like Spiller really turned it on. That allowed Anias to kind of move back to receiver for the most part. And I thought Spiller just got better as the year went on. He obviously showed out against Florida. He had a good game against Mississippi State. Had a heck of a game against Arkansas. Really embarrassed some of the Arkansas defenders and put those plays on his highlight tape. But I mentioned earlier, like, I've gotten big into draft Twitter. I follow probably 50 or so. I don't know if they're like professional scouts, but like the Twitter scouts. But even like the big guys, like Louis Riddick is a big guy on the NFL on ESPN, and he's all over Isaiah Spiller. And pretty much everybody you talk to, everybody you look at is like he's up there with Breece Hall from Iowa State as probably the top back in the draft next year. There's some that think he would have been the top back this year if he had been eligible. But I can't say enough about him. His dad played at A&M. I think it was, I think he's certainly proud of his son, and I know Isaiah is. I don't know. I just expect him to have a good year. I don't, however, expect him to be in the Heisman talk too much, because of the next guy we're going to talk about may dip into his carry, his workload, and that is Devon Achane. If you watch the Orange Bowl and you're a casual fan, you may have been introduced to Devon Achane for the very first time. You're like, who is this kid number 6 that is running 75 yards for a touchdown? But if you're like Chase and I, you've known about him for a few years now, and I think we mentioned on an episode that we were in Georgia for the game against the Bulldogs, and he committed that Friday night that we had gotten there, and me and Chase were going nuts and celebrating that he finally committed. If you go watch the guy's highlight tape in high school, it's just insane. And I know Chase, this is probably his favorite player, so I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, he is. I do want to say one more thing about Isaiah, which you kind of mentioned. With his dad being a legacy, we already talked about how he grew up quick, and he's been the leader of this running back stable for 2 years now, and this will be his 3rd year of being, leading by example. And then, like you said, scouts all over the United States think of him as one of the best running backs in the country. He's definitely one of the best running backs in the SEC. If you have to just assume who is going to be the natural leader of our offense this year, just in terms of just leadership qualities and a player that people look up to, it's got to be him. There's so much to love about him. He's such a good kid. He just seems to have just such a great head on his shoulders. Like, I don't know. I really, really, really like him. And I think, if you look back into our history, definitely during the Sumlin years, we flip-flopped a lot on what type of running back we would incorporate in our system. We would have the fast, shifty running backs for a little bit, and then we would have the big bruiser running backs, and it was kind of like we couldn't figure out where. And he just seems to be that perfect mesh between the two. He's tough, he's fast, he's quick. I mean, he will be a quality running back in the NFL. But I do think that we'll see him perform a lot this year. But that being said, yes, Achane is my absolute favorite college football player, maybe of all time. There's a lot of really good players out there that I've enjoyed watching through the years. So it would be kind of hard to compare him to like Laviska Shenault or, Vince Young, just different, like just Johnny Manziel.
Reggie Bush.
Yeah, just the elites of college football. So it'd be hard to compare him to those, but honestly, that would be a better comparison for me than to try to compare him to just other players in college football. In my opinion, he was probably the most underrated recruit that I've ever followed. And he was still pretty highly rated, but he is so fast that it is wild. When you watch his tape, it's like 17 minutes of nothing but touchdowns. I don't remember, and I don't have the statistics in front of me to be able to tell you exactly how many touchdowns he had at the varsity level in the best division of Texas high school football. It
was over 100. I remember that.
I do know it was over 100. You're right about that. I want to say it was 123, but it was his high school tape is just insane. I still watch it from time to time. He's Emily's favorite player. Whenever he would get on the field last year, just for a play or two, Emily would go berserk, and that's because like she's sat there while I watch him on YouTube and watch, his different interviews. She thinks he's like he's so nice. She's always like, he seems so nice, and he does seem really nice.
His interview after the Orange Bowl win, because he was the MVP, and as we know, like freshmen don't talk to the media at A&M, so like his first interview is on national television at the Orange Bowl after winning MVP, and he's just like so like quiet and soft spoken, and just seems really like a super nice kid.
Yeah.
I know that he won Brittany over as well in his interview.
Emily just was, he's so cute, he's so cute, and he is. He's a good, soft-spoken kid. He just seems like he's. I don't know. He reminds me of one of my friends growing up. There's a guy named Devon that was my best friend growing up. In fact, his mom cut my hair today. But he reminds me a lot of Devon, just a good, softly spoken kid, but that is just one of the best human beings you'll ever meet in your life.
Yeah,
that's who he reminds me of. He may not be that way, but he sure seems that way. But past his character, let's look at his athleticism. Oh my gosh, he is so fast.
Yeah, so like when he was a recruit, after his junior year, like before I'd watched his film, I've got this kind of like, I guess this bias against track stars as football players, and like this was before I'd seen any film of him, but all I knew about him was that he ran a really fast 100 meter time, which is great. Like he just set he didn't set records, but I think he was a track All-American, super fast, and that's great. But like not all track stars make great football players, so I'm hesitant to go in on a player as a big time player just because they run a good track time. Well, then I watched his tape, and this is not your average bear. He is a football player that happens to be good at track. Also, like he's built like a running back. He's extremely strong and built in his lower body. He's a football playing dude. Like he can, and the thing is, he doesn't do it a ton on his high school tape, but he's actually got excellent hands. And like I know he had one big catch for A&M last year, but I'd like to see him, involved even more in that, because I think it's just one more way to stress defenses. Yeah.
Well, this is kind of a peripheral point, I guess. This goes to scouting guys, I guess. I think Ryan Broniger with Texags is one of the best, I don't know what you would call them. Evaluators, thank you. One of the best evaluators in the business. And I'm talking specifically about guys that might not get as much of a look as they should nationally. It just seems like at least one guy in every recruiting cycle, he will start to talk about, like Achane, he was all about. Layden Robinson, he was all about.
Bryce Foster,
he was all about. But Bryce Foster was also like a really recruit. High national recruit. But I'm talking more of like guys that might be a 3 or 4 star, fringe 4-star, like low 4-star player. That Bronny's like, this guy is incredible. They always turn out to be really, really good players. And so that makes me think that he's a really good evaluator. But the reason I make that point is if you go back and listen to any of his old interviews with Achane, you know how you could tell, like people listening, you can tell that I'm smiling right now as opposed to if I'm not smiling. You can hear a smile, and a lot of times like you could hear how excited Bronny was to be interviewing the guy, because you could just hear like how excited he was about this recruit. And so when he committed to us originally, I was so excited, so excited. And going back to him being kind of like a quiet kid, it was in the middle of the night. He just posted a picture or something of Kyle Field. Like it wasn't this big,
video
motivational picture of, I came from the bottom, now I'm here kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was like, hey, A&M, I'm going to commit to y'all. Like it was very, very like humble. And But I say all that to say, Bronny, I remember watching one of the tapes, and it was right after he committed. Bronny was talking about, go watch his high school tape, and there's a play that's maybe 2 or 3 minutes in, where he bounces it outside, and he's running, and then he notices that the defender is kind of closer to him than he would like, and all of a sudden he puts it in this higher gear that you don't ever see. And so when you
I know
watch
exactly what play you're talking about.
Yeah, when you watch his tape, a lot of that is him jogging. And he's the fastest player on the field, and it's just him just jogging. But when he has to put in that overdrive,
yeah,
it's literally like playing NFL Blitz 2003 and you hit turbo.
Yeah.
Like it's like he just all of a sudden has this huge turbo that nobody can keep up with.
And it's not to say that he's not a high effort player, because he is, but
very much so. Yeah.
He only he's so talented. He only does as much as he has to because he's aware of how good he is and how fast he is. On the play you said, he's like, well, I'm gonna have to, speed it up a little bit, and he just, hits just hits the gas and he's gone. Like it's ridiculous the things that he can do on a football field.
Yeah, and so those of you who might have no idea what he looks like other than maybe the Orange Bowl, just think back to Christian Kirk, think to Speedy Noyle, and some of those plays that those guys made and how they just looked magic out on the field, and that if you could get them out in space, they weren't going to go down. Nobody was going to catch them. That's this kid, but even probably to a higher degree. I mean, he is so fast.
I think I'll go find his senior highlight on YouTube and just link it in the episode, so folks can go click on that.
We definitely need to do that because
it's so much fun to watch.
And he's another one where his highlights are on YouTube, which if you do follow recruiting, that not all the recruits put their stuff on YouTube, and it never really ends up there. You have to go on Huddle, and sometimes it's hard to watch them, because you have to filter through ads or whatever. But he is. The only other tape that I can remember watching that I was like as excited about that I would watch over and over again was Speedy Noyle.
Yeah.
And but I just think he is an incredible player, got an incredible head on his shoulders, but he proved himself this year in multiple occasions. Of course he did in the Orange Bowl, but he played throughout the year too, and his very first touchdown was a very hard-fought touchdown. It wasn't straight up, running. And so he proved pretty early on that he's not just if you get him out in space, he can beat you, but if you can contain him, he can't. He's not like that. He can run you over too.
Oh yeah.
And he's very much a between the tackles runner just as much as he is out in space. But yeah, he will be. I think that he will be one of the top running backs in the nation this year? Yes, I do. I think both he and Spiller will. And do I think this will be his best year with A&M? No, I do not. I think next year and maybe even the following year, he is going to set the world on fire. And he will be a very, very exciting player to watch, just because he's so quick, so fast, and it's going to be like Aniyah Smith, but to a much higher degree. Again, I would say probably Christian Kirk would be the best comparison of recent years, just because he's going to play a lot like that. Yeah.
Let's talk about his usage real quick before we move on to some other players. Like you said, he kind of came on about halfway through the year and scored his first touchdown against Arkansas. He, showed out against Auburn. I think he had 99 yards on 9 carries. And, obviously he showed out in the Orange Bowl. But it seemed like, excuse me, it seems like he only came in late in games. And I think we see a difference in that this year. I think.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly on that.
Like, I know that we were talking off camera or off, like before we recorded about some of Jimbo's past years. And one thing I just remembered was in 2013, the year that Jimbo won it all with Florida State, he had 3 backs with at least 10 touchdowns. So I think he prefers to like not ride one guy. I think he wants to have multiple backs get, I guess get a lot of touches. And I think we see that a lot more often. I think we see him and Isaiah split more of the workload throughout the game and not just in the end of games. And you could also see him go 2-back and put Spiller and Achane on the field at the same time and still have, Anias in the slot and your other weapons out there.
Yeah, because they're altogether different players and how they like where their strengths are. So if you have them both on the field, that's a tough thing to defend because you don't know if you need to go heavier, if you need to try to cut down on the space, and it would prevent you from being able to sell out to either one. Mm-hmm. And I'm a big proponent of Jimbo has a type, in my opinion. If you go back and look at some of his just insanely good players through the years, you've got Devontae Freeman. You have who else? Help me out.
Dalvin Cook. Cam Akers,
Travion. Whenever he came on, he turned Travion into a stud. Travion was already a stud, though.
Yeah.
But then if you look at Anias Smith and what he's done with Anias Smith, Devon Achane, and then Amari Daniels and Yul Keith Brown, they all fit this mold of being like sub 6 foot. They're like 5'8", 5'9", 200 pound, maybe somewhere between 180 and 200. Like they're kind of little guys, and he turns them all into just some of the best players to play college football, and it's probably because they already are, and he just takes them and uses them, and so it makes you look at somebody like Christian Kirk maybe, and you think like, what could he have done with that player? Because Coach Sumlin did really good with some of those smaller guys, but Jimbo seems to really like those guys, and so you don't see these huge, burly running backs. You see more little shifty guys that can really mess you up, and
they're still built though. Like they're not, 5'8", 170. They're 5'8", 205.
Right. But it's just funny because I feel like all of his guys are like kind of short, smaller guys, and then he turns them into phenomenal players, Yeah.
So I think we both think that those two guys are going to command the lion's share of the running back carries. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to save our talk about Anias Smith for the receivers. We both believe he'll probably play about 95% of the snaps of his snaps at receiver. I do think he may mix it up maybe a couple times a game and get a few carries here and there. I know Jimbo likes to experiment with different personnel sets and like move formations without changing players. I know he did that against Tennessee last year where they would get to the goal line. He put Spiller at fullback, brought in Anias from out wide and put him at running back and scored on that play. So I think he'll do it, but you won't see Anias get the carries that he got last year. But some other guys, the third running back position on this team is kind of a battle. There's a couple of bigger guys that came in last year that played a little bit in some mop-up duty but didn't play a ton. One is Ernest Crownover, who we mentioned last episode, who blue-shirted. JUCO back from Kilgore. What is he, about 6'1", 225? He's a bigger back.
Mm-hmm.
And then
all these three, all these other three are bigger backs, I would say. And you said Crownover, Devon Hubbard, and DeAndre Jackson.
Yeah.
They're all bigger guys. And I would say that I don't know that they're going to be competing for who comes third. I think their position group is really going to be there for interspersing between Isaiah and Achane, and I think they're going to be really utilized to help keep those guys fresh, because you'll see. I think you can see them play split back sets. We saw some of that last year, where they would be out there. I don't know necessarily, like, I hate to say that they'll be utilized as a fullback, because I don't think that they'll just be strictly a fullback, but a set where you have two running backs, with them being one of them as like a leading blocker, and to be able to, because they're all three guys that if you hand them the ball, they're still going to perform really well.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a step up from, if you look in the past at our fullbacks, they traditionally are walk-ons, and I feel like we might want to try to use some of the really good talent that we have in that space to where we add one more threat on the field as opposed to just one more blocker.
Yeah. I think they're all good. I think they're all good backs. I think we may not see a ton from them until after Spiller is gone, just because because him and Achane are so good. Like, they're going to get just like so much of the workload. But these are good backs that we have waiting in the wings to take over. We talked about Crownover. He looked good in the spring game. I'm a big fan of DeAndre Jackson. He's from Georgia. He's probably 6 foot, 230 pounds. I thought he looked good in the spring game. He caught the ball really well, broke some tackles. I didn't see much from Hubbard in the spring game. I think he was out with an injury, but he's a similar size to those guys, and a pretty solid player in his own right as well. And then in the incoming class, we have a back that was rated a 5-star by some services. I think he was a composite 4, but LJ Johnson from Cy-Fair, he's more of the 5'10", 210 pound back that Jimbo tends to go after, and really talented player. And you might see him push into that conversation and get some of those carries after the top two guys.
Yeah, I think he's going to be. I would compare him, if I'm comparing him to other players that we've seen on the team, he's more in tune with Achane. I'm sorry, not Achane. Isaiah Spiller.
Yeah.
They've got a similar size, a similar running ability, and he is a phenomenal player. So it's kind of like you're hitting the reset button where you have him coming in as a true freshman, just like we did whenever Spiller came in as a true freshman. He does have the talent that if we had to rely on him every single play, like we did Spiller his first year, I think he absolutely could do that. But so I think he would be your natural third. Really, actually, I think that if we ever got to the point that we really needed a third back, we probably would pull Anias back in. But I just don't know that we'll really need that, because I think you're going to see the lion's share split between Spiller and Achane.
Yeah.
And then I think you'll see Hubbard, Jackson, and Crownover interspersed between them, to give them a player or two of rest. And so I just think we may not see very much of LJ this year, but that's okay. I mean that ought to show you the depth that we have at this position, because 2 years ago we had a really talented freshman player come in, and we had one injury, and all of a sudden he's a starter, and he played 95% of the snaps. And we have that same player coming on this team, and we might not even see him take 5% of the snaps this year.
Yeah.
Let's hope that none of them get hurt. That's always my hope, is that nobody gets hurt, but that is also part of the game too, you know.
Yeah, but it's a very deep, very talented running back room, and it really just sets up incredibly well for the next few years. Like this year you have the duo Spiller and Achane. Next year you have maybe Achane and LJ, or Achane and Ernest Crownover, something like that. But there's so many options that one of these guys is going to turn into a big-time player. And then, you know, this is very early, but I think I would expect that, you know, Achane will probably leave early as an NFL draft pick after what we expect him to do these next 2 seasons. So, you know, it just like, and then you have LJ and Amari Daniels, who we haven't said much about him yet. But
I was about to mention him, because the way that I look at it, and this might not be like a very technical way to look at it, maybe, but I see 3 groups of running backs. I see these. The first group is these your main players that are tough and hard runners, and they could run you clear over, and they're a force to be reckoned with. And in that group, I put Isaiah and LJ. Then I see this secondary crop of guys who are, you know, they're there to really help the team. They're good, reliable guys. They offer a threat, but they're not Heisman contenders necessarily, but they are still really good running backs that can add in. That's where I see Hubbard, Jackson, and Crownover. And then that third crop is more of an all-purpose back, and maybe could call a slot receiver as well, because they're kind of these jack of all trades guys, and we have a bunch of those. And that's where I would put Achane. That's where I would put Aniyah Smith. That's where I would put Amari Daniels. That's where I would put Yul Keith Brown. He's one we haven't talked about either, but so if we're going to make comparisons on the way that these guys play, Amari Daniels is going to be very much like Achane. His tape is a lot of fun to watch as well. He's very similar to Aniyah. He's very similar to Achane. He's very quick, very shifty, but you could put him anywhere on the field and he's going to perform well. And Yul Keith is exactly the same way, which we'll talk about him more in the receiver episode, because we expect that he'll play more at the slot receiver position and might come down to play running backs if we needed him, but I don't think we need him at that position.
Yeah, I think Yul Keith compares very favorably to Aniyah. Also, if you're unfamiliar with those two guys we just talked about, Yul Keith Brown and Amari Daniels, they are both true freshmen that just got here this summer, both from Miami Central High School, played on the same team, and they just destroyed everyone they played last year with that combo. They're good, and that's a huge school to break into. That's one of the benefits that we might have mentioned, but having Jimbo, I mean, you got to think Jimbo in the state of Florida is probably like a lot like Mac Brown in the state of Texas. I was just about to say that. As you were saying that, I was like, he's going to say Mac Brown in Texas.
I mean, because everybody in Texas knows Mac Brown.
Yeah.
You know, everybody in Florida, I guarantee, knows Jimbo Fisher. And so
and
those Florida State teams that these guys grew up watching were all coached by Jimbo Fisher. And that's really, really big to them. And that's why, like, That's what's cool about it, is we're already in my opinion, the number one state to, like the number one place to recruit from in the state of Texas. But there would be a really good argument that Florida is more talented than Texas, and that's almost like a constant argument in college football is which one has the better players. But not only are we in the state of Texas and have that to our advantage, but we've got one of the best, one of the biggest names in the state of Florida over here coaching for us now, and we're seeing these guys like Miami Central's a huge school to be recruiting from, and I think it says something that we got their two best players.
Yeah. Speed kills, and Florida's got it. To wrap us up here, we'll spend a couple minutes talking about maybe some potential running backs that could join A&M in the future in this 2022 recruiting class. Chase, I don't know if you follow it very much, but I can take this part if you'd like.
Yeah, go for it, because I really don't.
Yeah.
I haven't really watched this one as closely here lately.
Yeah. I think they'll end up taking just one, but it's going to be a very highly rated guy, whoever it ends up being. They're looking at a kid from Tyler Legacy. His name is Jamarion Miller. He's got a lot of juice. He compares favorably to your typical Jimbo back, 5'10", maybe 200 pounds, super explosive kid. He's one of the top options. They're looking at Trevante Citizen from Louisiana. LSU's pushing there, but we'll see if A&M can land him. He honestly compares pretty well to Spiller. Really similar in size. Makes like he's got pretty good vision, makes good cuts. And then a third guy they're looking at is Le'Veon Moss, who just committed to Alabama a few weeks ago, but turned around the next week and visited A&M. So we'll definitely keep you up to date if any moves get made there. But you can rest assured that Jimbo's going to land a good back. He's got an eye for it. This offense is always going to run the football. It's a very enticing offense for a good back to come in and play.
What's the story on? Is it Brennan Thompson?
Brennan, yeah.
Brennan Thomas.
Thompson, yeah.
Thompson.
So he's
out. Is he a running back or is he a receiver?
He's more of a receiver.
Okay.
But I think he could. I think we've said this about a couple of guys, but he honestly could be like Anias to where he, plays mostly slot, but maybe, takes a few handoffs here and there. Yeah, he's a smaller guy. He's probably 5'8", 170, but extremely fast and extremely quick. Not just a track guy by any means.
And he's up in the Panhandle or something, right?
He's from Spearman, Texas, which is closer to Laramie, Wyoming than it is to College Station.
Okay. That's a fun fact of the
day. So it's up there. I know we may have a few of our dairy farmer friends that have places up in Dalhart. I bet they know where Spearman is. It's probably in their district. if I'm any good at geography, it probably is. But anything else on running backs?
I don't think so. I think if there's a position that everybody should be excited about this year, it's going to be running backs. And I think, which we'll get into more when we cover the offensive line, there's a lot of questions at O-line because we had just a phenomenal line where 4 of the 5 of them left. So I think we'll see a drop-off there, which could limit how successful our running backs are. But It's good to know that we've got this this talent at running back that could hopefully make up for what we might drop off a little bit on the O-line. And we've already covered the quarterbacks, so if Haynes King is your quarterback and you've got this talent at running back, and then you've got a really shifty and hard to contain quarterback, that helps when you have an inexperienced line, and so I think it's good that we have this because I really think this group of guys that we just talked about are going to be who really carries our team this year.
Yeah, and to add on to that, we're talking receivers on our next position breakdown, and to go along with the quarterback, if we're taking some more deep shots, that opens it up even more for these running backs to really go to work. Last thing I wanted to mention on Achane, I meant to say this earlier, but my favorite broadcasting moment during an A&M game last year was during Mississippi State. I think we were already, the game was already well in hand. It was in the fourth quarter, and Achane was getting a couple of carries, and the broadcasters were talking about him, And one of the guys goes, yeah, in high school he averaged 11 yards a carry. And the other guy goes, well, that can't be right.
It is.
It was right though.
He's incredible.
Yeah, no, it's going to be very special to watch. I think the running game is only going to improve off of how good it was last year. But thanks again for joining us. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. And this coming Tuesday, we're going to be breaking down the SEC West, which we're pumped about that. And then our next position breakdown will be the receivers and tight ends. So make sure you tune into that as well. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe. Tell a friend about our show. Leave a 5-star review and get your questions in. We posted on Facebook on Wednesday that we're starting to curate some questions for our Q&A episode in July. So make sure you get those in, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks, guys.